Someone said to me, "Oh, you should go to Bible college." I went to speak to the church elders. One of them literally laughed at me and said, "That's not for a place with people like you." So we all knew what he meant. Guys would run into the service with bats and balaclavas. Building was getting smashed up. Members were getting beaten in the street. We didn't realise we'd bought the house off a drug dealer. I'm driving in from the church back to the house. Police are out the door and I'm dragged out of the car. This car's registered to Reverend Mez McConnell. I'm like, "Well, I am the Reverend Mez McConnell." And his mate started laughing. One of them looked at me, looked at the driving licence and said to his mate, "Yeah, he is." I'm like, "Listen, boys, I'm here because these guys need Jesus. And you need Jesus too." They were gone so quick, they were away.
Welcome, everybody. This is Simon Gilbo with Inspired. Inspired, if you're new to us, is all about meeting different people from all sorts of different walks of life who are doing beautiful things. You know, we just get relentlessly bombarded in the media by a barrage of stuff that just makes us more depressed and anxious and cynical and negative. And what we need is to hear, well, just great stories that are going to stir faith and encourage us. So I've got no doubt this week you're going to be inspired because we've got with us Mez McConnell. Welcome, Mez.
Thank you.
So good to have you. So Mez, we're going to hear his story from a really rough start in life to currently being the director of 20 schemes. I love it. Schemes for us would be council estates, so the roughest parts of Scotland that he's had a vision to minister into their brokenness, and he's it's church planting, it's revitalisation across Scotland, also involved in Acts 29 and written a few books telling his stories. But anyway, that's enough by means of introduction, Mez. So grateful for you to be with us. I just want to set you up really to tell your story. It was a pretty rough start, wasn't it? Can you just go for it?
Yeah. I come from the Republic of Ireland originally, born in Donegal in the 70s, and as a baby moved to the north of Ireland, Belfast, in a big children's institution there in the 1970s. I don't know if you remember a film a few years back, Kenneth Branagh film called Belfast. Mm-hmm. Basically, that was in my entire era. And so, I was jumped about from pillar to post, spent quite a long time in a big Catholic children's home, and then somewhere in the 70s, when the troubles got really bad, I ended up on a ship, came over to England with my dad, and some woman he'd met, and then moved to Yorkshire, the north of England, and then spent a lot of years in and out of care, in and out of numerous foster homes. Life was pretty chaotic and abusive.
So in your childhood, there was no concept of God at all, was there? Or was there this, you got sort of abused in different ways from people that represented faith?
Yeah, I mean, it's Ireland. In the 70s, as I said, I grew up quite a lot of time I was spent in a big Catholic nursing home run by nuns who were more or less actually very, very kind to me and my sister. And so we would have to go to Mass every week, and all the kids in the home, we were all taken together. So I believed in God in that sense. It wasn't until I got much later on, when I became more cognizant that maybe some of the stuff that happened to me wasn't good, that I began to become more and more disenfranchised from the Christian faith.
I think you said that it was around about 12 that you first started doing drugs, was that right?
Yeah, 11, 12. I think my first experiment was with cannabis. I think I tried drinking, that didn't go down. I didn't like that. And cannabis sort of hit the scene. Tried that, didn't much like that either. I soon progressed on to uppers, and ecstasy was coming out, and LSD and cocaine and heroin, everything sort of snowballed. Yeah, that would have been the 80s, in 80s, 90s in Yorkshire, when drugs really began to the rave scene hit the shores back then. If you don't remember those days, I don't know how old you are, but acid house, all that, yeah.
Did you manage to not get expelled?
I got suspended a few times. I mean, I was, unfortunately for me, quite intelligent. So back then there was something called the 11 plus exam. Unfortunately for me, I passed it and ended up in a grammar school, the only kid from a council estate in a grammar school. So you can imagine how that was. So you can imagine how it went down on my estate, and you can imagine how it went down in my school. So nobody was very happy with me. So I was a good student, straight A student, loved reading. I've read since I could. I read my first book at 3, according to my dad, and I believe I don't remember a time I couldn't read. And then around 12 or 13, the very abusive woman who brought me up until that point, sort of sporadically between care homes and stuff. My dad left her and met somebody else who wasn't abusive, but was a lovely woman, and they'd been married 40 odd years together. But in the strange providence of life, that change of person to more stable actually set me off the wrong way, and I just began to become more and more angry, violent, hating authority, hating school, hating everybody in it. And so, my grades and plummeted. I mean, I got suspended a number of times. I think I made it to the end of school just about. And then hit the pavement, if you like, at 16.
What was the journey to prison?
I mean, I was wild at that point. I'd been sort of jumping about the streets, spending more and more time on the estate with older lads, getting involved in all sorts of stuff, burglaries, and then when the drugs came in, obviously dealing, hanging out in squats, 16, 17, doing mad stuff. I mean, I remember going to a rave on Christmas Eve, I think, and I didn't come home until February, but I couldn't have told you where I was or where I went. We were they were wild days, and getting in trouble with the law, fighting generally. My list of offences got longer and longer. Committed a crime and did a bunk to Spain when I think it was 18 or 19, I can't remember. On the run from the police for robbery and violence. Got deported from Spain for about 3 months. Lived on the streets in London. Down south in England for about 18 months, and I got arrested in a fight for stabbing a couple of men, and ended up in HMP Armley, which is a big prison in Leeds. I was 21. My life was just a total mess. I was a mess.
Was it a blessing, do you think, to end up in prison?
I mean, I quite liked prison. That's just me. It was 23 and a half hour bang up. It was back when it was a bed and a bucket, all this TVs and whatever you get today. I would have loved prison even more today, I think. I mean, you could say it was a blessing. Looking back in that, I can see the hand of the Lord in it. I was just, I mean, a lot of my friends are dead now. Half of them were dead then, or doing long-term prison sentences, or in mental institutes with the amount of drugs we took. I don't know how I survived up until that point. I was just, but it got me out of that situation. Got me into another more violent situations, but made me just stop and take an account of my life, really. And then it's in prison I began to think more seriously about Jesus. I'd met Christians a few years prior to being locked up, and they came and witnessed to me on the streets when I was down south. And the first time I met Christians, I got arrested. I think I smashed up one of their cars, and there's lots of threats of violence. But these guys kept coming week after week on the streets, playing football with us in the community centre. And then at half time, they would give a talk about God and that. Can you imagine? I mean, I was not having any of that, although secretly listening. And this went on for a couple of years, and during that time, my life was just disintegrating. And then I ended up, like I say, in Leeds jail. And then a few months into my sentence, a couple of these Christian guys came up to Armley to visit me. And then I sort of began to think a little bit more about what they were saying.
So they drove up like 3 or 4 hours. So they're really showing their love for you. I
I
mean,
mean, it was a few hundred, yeah, a few hundred miles. I mean, I wouldn't be saying showing their love, but that's what you would say now. But I mean, I'd be like, these guys are weirdos. But they, it was 400 miles. I can't remember how. It was a long way. And back then, Amley was like, I mean, I used to visit my brothers when I was younger. It was 16 gates just to get into the visiting room for 15 minutes. It was a heavy place. And so these guys came a long way. So, they came and visit me. I'd been in solitary for about 4 days for some violence. I can't remember what it was, but so I was wild, and they just let me out. Sat and talked to these guys. And you know something interesting? They never talked about Jesus once. And the first time I met them, and I was thinking to myself, and because of that made me go away and think about Jesus more. So I worked that one out, discussed that one over a coffee. Because usually I thought, these guys, they're at it. At the time, do you remember the David Koresh thing years ago? Well, that was on TV around then. I'm thinking, these guys are fruitcakes, right? Trying to brainwash me or do some weird crap. So I was a bit paranoid. But they came, they brought me a radio, they brought me some tobacco, talked to me like I was a human being rather than a project. And actually, I'm going to go away and maybe find something out a bit more about this sort of Christianity lark. So I actually went to the prison library. So I put an application. You had to put an app in at jail to go somewhere. So I put an app into the prison library. Went to the prison library. I didn't know what I was looking for. It must be some Christian-y section or something. So I found this book by an old geezer. It's not Fred Lemon. No, it is Fred Lemon, because I always get mixed up with Jack Lemmon, who's an actor. Fred Lemon is an old school geezer from back in the 50s, I think. Anyway, obviously a book about his life. I'm in my cell, I'm reading his book, and then it gets to this weird part. Like, he said, these angels came to visit me in pinstripe suits in my cell. I'm like, this guy was a fruit. So I threw the book in my slot bucket and left it there. But funny enough, I'd actually stolen the book. I went to the library. I didn't want anyone to know I was going to read a Christian book, so I shoved it down my pants. So I'm thinking, right, what's the worst going to happen? I'm in jail, right? I'm in max secure, so I'm steal this thing. But anyway, so I thought this guy was a fruit. Put it down, didn't think much more about it. Got transferred to a prison in Doncaster for the last 3 months of my sentence, and then I was due for parole. But I didn't have an address. I'd been homeless at that point, basically, for about 6 years, dossing here, there, and everywhere from the about 16 to 22. And because of the violent nature of my offences, I couldn't, they wouldn't release you without an address. So I asked this Christian dude, one of them would visit me, said, listen, give us an address and I'll be able to get out of jail. And so they did. And
wow.
So I had to travel down to Swindon after I got released. That's where the guy lived, and see my parole officer. And then I moved in with this Christian guy, which is hilariously weird.
Amazing love, isn't it, of him? I mean, just mind-blowing consistency.
Oh, nuts, there. Right? Amazing love or nuts.
Yeah. Well, and God's love for us is nuts, isn't it?
Do you want to know the really sad bit about this story?
Go on.
He doesn't walk with the Lord anymore, that guy.
Oh, no.
Denies the Lord. Absolute heartbreaker.
Crazy. So what was your journey? I hear, you talk about a Matthew Henry commentary. Was that at his house? You're just reading us? Not the most likely path.
Yeah, so it was like a proper Christian-y house. Back then, you could tell you're in a Christian house because they all have an obsession with dry flowers and Monet prints. They all wore fleeces and they all drank Schlur. You could definitely tell do you know what I mean? It was just like this thing. I don't know if they're some Christian owned Slur or something. But anyway, so I'm in this geezer's house and I'm thinking, I'm out of prison. I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to get myself together. I mean, I've said this to myself over the years. I'm going to get myself together, maybe get a job or something, get off the drugs, just get my life back under control. I lasted about a week. I saw a pal in the streets in town. He offered me some drugs. I'm like, go on then. So I went back to his place. We got high, but I was actually thinking, but I wasn't happy. I was sitting there thinking, I don't want to be doing this anymore. So I remember exactly what happened. I left the guy's house. I'm like, I'm not even getting a buzz off this. I'm going to go back and stay at this Christian guy's house and try and get myself together. So anyway, I went back to his house and I found this Matthew Henry commentary on the Bible, because as you know, he's a bit of a monster of a book. And I wouldn't have known the difference between that and the Bible. So so I thought, right, I'm going to read this bad boy, see what it's actually about. So I read it. I read the whole book, and it took me a couple of weeks, but I banged through it. A bit freaky in the Old Testament. I'd be stopping and asking this geezer questions on Leviticus and Numbers, and also, I think in my mind thinking, he'll never know. I'll just pretend to be, like blasé about, like it's just a normal question. But in his head, he must be thinking, where's this guy getting these questions from Leviticus? But anyway, so I'm asking these questions, blah, 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 thinking about it. And actually, it's Romans that done me in, the book of Romans. As it's done a lot of people in over history. I hated the book of Romans. I remember my social worker and my parole officer and all these counsellors over the years who'd said to me, look, you're a good lad at heart. You're just a product of your environment. You were abused growing up, care, all of that stuff. Of course, you've turned out the way you have. But if you'd had a good background, you'd have made different life choices, blah, blah, blah. And so, I think probably motivated to help me, but actually they were just enabling my lifestyle and also my victim mentality, which is, this happened to me, therefore I can behave how I want. I'm a victim, you know what I mean? I got deprived of sweets as a kid, so I can mug these people for what they've got. And Paul's like, yeah, and I'll transliterate. This is the Mez translation. Boo-hoo, you had a tough childhood. So what? You're a sinner against a holy God, and you need to take responsibility for your sin and not justify it because of others' behaviour, which was hard, right? Because I'd been badly abused over a decade. I mean, terrible stuff. And here I am confronted with, yep, that's happened to you, but actually you're still under the wrath of God. Your sin separates you from him, and others' behaviour towards you is no justification. And so I remember closing the book. I remember booting it across the room at one point, thinking I would lick into Paul if I met him. And I obviously, we're Christians, right? We look back with spiritual language now. So I was falling under conviction of sin, etc. But I didn't know that. I couldn't sleep. I was just agitated, thinking this through and trying to defend myself. I mean, I knew I was a sinner. That was just that wasn't a sticking issue. The issue was, what about these people who sinned against me? So anyway, this went on for a couple of weeks, and I got fed up of it. And I'm like, right, picked it back up again, started reading Romans. I think it's the one book in the commentary that I think I must have reread it about 10 times, just to make sure I understood it. And so I remember thinking one day, right, this is doing my head in. What was I doing? I might have been smoking some weed. I was doing something. And I was thinking to myself, I'm going to try and give this a go. My life's a mess. I'm a mess. I've tried it my way. So I remember sitting on a park bench on my own. Actually, it's the 3rd of May, 1995. And I remember just sitting there going, right, Lord, I'm a sinner. I know Jesus died for my sins. You're going to have to help me out. Amen. Just, my version of the sinner's prayer. Not theologically accurate, of course, but heartfelt, I think. No angels in pinstripe suits, no warm, fuzzy feeling in my bosom. Nothing. Just a man walking past with his dog. And so I thought, right, maybe there's some sort of formula or, ritual you have to do something to become a Christian. So I went to one of the guys I was living with and said, look, I think I want to become one of you Christian-y types. I've said this, but is there like some sort of, magic words or something? He was a bit freaked out, I think. And he said, well, not actually. Let me pray with you. So he prayed with me. And again, nothing. I don't know what I was expecting. That was a very suspicious dude anyway. And coldly emotional. unemotional. Probably psychoanalyze that, couldn't we, together? And nothing happened. But my friend introduced me to this guy in the church called Mark, who was an older guy, a deacon at the church. He's a nice guy. I knew him from football when I was on the streets. And he began to meet with me a couple of times a week. And he actually went through this teaching material. It was called Each One Teach One or something. It basically starts in Genesis, works through the New Old Testament, and it's the gospel in the Old Testament, which I didn't know at the time. But anyway, I'm reading this stuff. I'm asking him all these mad questions. It took maybe a month or so. I woke up one day, and I just suddenly thought, I don't have that heaviness in my soul anymore. That sort of dark. I loved Albert Camus and with The Plague and all that nihilistic stuff. I mean, I was a dark dude, and I wasn't skipping down the street singing The Sound of Music or anything, but I thought something inside's changed. I feel a bit more chilled. But anyway, I skipped a little bit of that. You know what memory's like? Put memory in drugs and you don't get timelines very good. So let me just jump back a little bit. I was reading this thing, and then I think I ended up on a church weekend away, a youth weekend somewhere. It was in Wales. This is just before I got saved. Again, I thought, is this a cult? Is it weird? So I was a bit cautious. They actually studied the Book of Ezra. It's weird what you remember, right? I mean, who studies the Book of Ezra anyway? But I was watching these Christians jump about and hang out and be pals. And then they asked me to go to church on the Sunday. I'd never been to church before. So I went to this church. It was an old Welsh chapel. And some old geezer got at the front, starts giving it the old these and thous. I'm looking at the guy I'm with. I'm like, is that how Welsh people speak, is it? That's a bit weird. And he's like, well. Then he opened the AV. I'm not making a comment on this argument, but, started reading from the AV, which I didn't know what it was. Prayed AV language. Then they also stood up and sang some hymn from, I don't know when, 1500 and something. Sat down, stood up. Anyway, it was your normal, very Welsh Reformed chapel service, at least back then, 30 odd years ago. I didn't have a clue, mate. Not a clue. And, we went outside. They were all dead excited. They were all asking me, what did you think about that? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, do you have to do that, every week? Because I would rather go back to jail. I'd rather do hard time than have to sit through that every week. I mean, what that crack? And they were all, I think, slightly disappointed because it was awful, mate. I mean, God, the Lord forgive me, it wasn't, looking back now, but you've got to imagine, culturally, I am nowhere here. I didn't understand a thing. So I'm just going to stick to reading this Matthew Henry commentary in private and trying to find out about Jesus. I liked Jesus. Jesus I could get. Revolutionary, sticking it to the man. Obviously, I didn't get the Son of God thing at that point, but I was feeling the message. Do you know what I mean? Whereas the package it came in, particularly there, I couldn't understand the wrapping paper. Never mind what was going on. So, church, wasn't for me. Anyway, so I'd get converted not long after that, maybe a few months after that. And then I started going to church. And again, it was a very reformed church. Lovely, lovely people. God bless them. I love them dearly. No idea of anything to do with so the women wore Laura Ashley dresses, which apparently was part of the school uniform of reformed churches in the 80s and 90s. Geezers wore suits and that. I mean, I wore shirt and tie for the first 6 months of being saved. That's how scary. Can you believe it? Because I can't. I feel embarrassed now. But the Lord overlooks these sins, doesn't he? And anyway, so super reformed church, 50-minute expositional sermons. I didn't know what that was. I think at the time, the old pastor who's still alive, Mr. F, was going through Matthew's gospel, like one verb a week or whatever, the old school stuff. But I quite liked it. I found it fascinating. What made it easier for me was the stuff I was doing in the week with the guy who was discipling me, because now I was like, right, okay, I'm making some connections here, but still difficult. Yeah, and then about 9 months in to being saved, 9 months basically out of jail, made the ridiculous decision that I wanted to go to Bible college. So that was my early church experience. Was that rabbiting on that? That was a bit rabbity, wasn't it?
No, that was all right. But I'm looking forward just to hearing a bit about the Bible college experience, because you weren't the average student. This is Bournemouth, wasn't it? And I think, was it at least 3 different occasions where you smacked someone in the face as a fellow student? Tell us a bit about that.
No, that's not true. So I went to Bible college. The story how I get there is freaky. So I didn't even know there was a Bible college. So I was actually I was doing something called a access course back at Swindon College, which is basically A levels. I'd left with like 8 GCSEs and all that, despite all my madness. So I went back to school. Wasn't sure what I was going to do. I think I did politics and philosophy or something. And then I was witnessing to a lot of friends on the street, and someone said to me, "Oh, you should go to Bible college." And I'm like, "What's that like? I mean, what's that about?" And then they said, "Oh, you at college?" And so, Bible. I'm like, "What? Like the full time and that?" They're like, "Yeah." I thought, "Oh, that sounds buzzing." So I made an inquiry about that. I went to speak to the church elders. One of them literally laughed at me and said, "No, that's not for a place with people like you, son. You just, stick to what you're doing. Don't worry about it." So that really annoyed me. I'm like, "What do you mean people like me like?" And we all knew what he meant. So I don't know how I applied to this college down south. I won't embarrass them any more than I already have. And I went for an interview. Clearly, I didn't. Didn't know much. I'm telling them my story. I think I freaked half of the interview people out. I was rough, but I was smart. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't like, I was a bookish dude. Anyway, I left the interview, and I got a letter a few weeks later saying, "Congratulations, we'd love to accept you. You're starting in August or something, blah, blah, blah." So I'm buzzing. So anyway, turned up on the day, and went to the reception, whatever, and the geezer says, what are you doing here? I'm like, "What do you mean?" I've got a letter of acceptance on that. They gave me the letter. It turned out they wanted to put me off for a year, but the secretary had put the wrong date in. They had put that date in, so they had to accept me. Well, they didn't have to, but they did, right? So I ended up at college, Bible college. Did you ever go to Bible college?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just a house for weirdos, right? I mean, it's just jail with the Bible. Do you know what I mean? And it literally, do you know how freaky it was? They had the same beds and blue sort of cotton blankets that Armley Jail had. So I was a bit, triggered, as the kids say these days. Thinking, this is weird. I'm not sure I like this. And there'd be different kinds of people there, and people, middle class people, and people I just never would have associated with. So it was tough. I had a couple of incidents. I didn't smack 3 people. There was a couple of incidents. One guy wanted to fill me with the Holy Spirit. He was telling me I needed to be baptized in the Spirit or something. I didn't know what any of that meant. I didn't have a clue what he was talking about. What were you talking about? And he says, "Oh, you need to be..." Anyway, he was going on and on and on and on. So telling me I didn't know the power of God in my life and this, that, and the other. It was during the time, you remember the Toronto blessing? It was all that sort of stuff. I didn't know what he's talking about. I'm just like, "Shut up, mate, or I'll smack you right in the mouth and you'll know what the power of the Spirit is." Which obviously wasn't good, was it? But it was just this big mad group of people around me. So yeah, that didn't go down well. We had a little incident, shall we say. And I offered him out. I said, "Look, I'll take you down my estate and we'll see who's got the power of the Holy Spirit. I'll tell people about Jesus. You do the heebie-jeebie stuff and bark like a dog and see what happens." But he didn't take me up on that. So that was my third incident. The second incident, some guy took a swing at me, so I whacked him in the chops. But But to be clear, for both these things, I did repent afterwards. And then the third one was one of my tutors there was an incident in my tutor's office where he just wasn't listening to me. I think I was going through culture shock. Do you know what I mean? I just couldn't cope with stuff. And I'd get flashbacks from LSD. My head was mashed. And he wasn't having it, so I just smashed all the stuff off his office desk. Which wasn't good, again, but you have to understand my mindset, right? So anyway, I'm leaving the office buzzing, praising the Lord, because the guy hadn't gone through the window. So clearly the sanctification, because all I did was smash his desk up. Anyway, the principal called me at the office. This is embarrassing as well years later. But he called me and he's like, well, can you explain what happened? I said, well, this geezer is annoying. And I'm paying him good money. Do you know what I mean? To give me good advice. But anyway, I can't remember what I said. But basically I said, all you people work for me. So you need to sort this out or I'm not paying my fees anymore. Which is technically true, right? I mean, they were my employees. That's how I saw it. Clearly, he didn't see it like that. So we came to an agreement. That was my first year. It was pretty full on, but I matured.
Yeah, amazing that they stuck with you, isn't it? Really?
But one tutor went to bat for me. I think most of the guys wanted me out.
Yeah, thank God for him.
But one guy went to bat for me. I wasn't aggressive. I'm not a bully. I'm quiet. I was getting provoked. The Holy Spirit, people were calling me, some guy called me a Calvinist. I'm like, what's that? I didn't even know what that was. I had to go and research that because I believed in the sovereignty of God. I didn't have a clue. One guy asked me if I was a pedo-Baptist, right? So I'm thinking he's just called me a pedophile, right? So I will leather you. I look like a pedo to you. And he's like, well, no, I'm just wondering, I'm like, call me that again and we'll see. You're going through the wall. So, I mean, there was a few cultural, you know what I mean?
Sure. Hey folks, I'm loving the Impact the Podcast and how much joy and encouragement it's bringing. Listen, here's some potential action points if you're enjoying it. The first one is we love feedback. So why don't you tell us where you listen to the podcast and how it's impacted your life by sending us a 1-minute voice note to podcast@greatlakesoutreach.org. We might air a few of those. Another thing you could do is give us a review on Spotify or iTunes. Subscribe there. Also, can you subscribe to our YouTube channel? We're trying to grow our presence there, and actually that is a key way of getting it out there further. Another way is to recruit new sign-ups. So could you think of 3 people that you could say, yeah, hey, this podcast, I'm loving it and I'd love you to engage with it as well. And then lastly, if you want to give to the work, this podcast comes out under the auspices of Great Lakes Outreach. We're working in Burundi, which is currently the second poorest and the hungriest country in the world. The needs are absolutely massive. And what's amazing, and we never did it for this purpose, but the money that's coming in through people like yourselves who are loving it is funding 5 ministries out in Burundi right now. That's impacting thousands upon thousands of lives. So, if you gave 20 quid a month, 20 quid here is like 200 quid out there, or 50 bucks a month, that's like 500 bucks of impact. I just stick a 0 on it in terms of knowing how far money goes out there. So we'd love it. You could do a one-off or a regular monthly support to greatlakesoutreach.org/inspired. That's greatlakesoutreach.org/inspired. And let's spread the love. All right. So 4 potential action points. You could do 1 or all 4. So that's feedback, sending in a voice note to us. You could give us a great review on Spotify or iTunes and subscribe to the YouTube channel. You could recruit others and gossip the podcast and get other signups, or you could give to greatlakesoutreach.org/inspired. I'll put all those links in the show notes below. And now let's get back to the podcast. Listen, we haven't said in the meantime, so you've been converted and you'd been getting out on the streets and you had seen people coming to faith.
Yeah. My evangelistic technique needed some finesse, perhaps, but the Lord used it. I mean, I remember making some poor girl kneel in a graveyard, said, right, you're going to hell. Like all of these people here, they haven't trusted in Jesus. And she's like crying and that. I'm like, yeah. I repented for that as well. But I meant well, but I was out on the streets talking to rough people. These weren't people who come into church. These are guys who are rough, and I'm like,
Yeah.
out there.
So
Didn't know anything other than we're all sinners. Jesus died for sinners, and if we don't trust him, we're going. That's about it. Which is why
yeah,
someone said to me, perhaps you need to go to Bible college and become a bit more rounded.
yeah. So you come out a few years later in Bible college, a bit more rounded. Sanctification has had a
Oh, I
bit of
mean,
a
I know
journey.
Greek. I'm an actual Christian now. I know.
Chronology-wise, was it then straight to Brazil?
No, so the Brazil's a strange one as well because I was about 15, 16. I was in a squat high watching the TV with some pals, and there was a late night thing. I can't remember what it was on, but it was like a panorama type program, and it was set. It was in Sao Paulo. Some police guy had gone and shot about 8 children lying in the streets. It was international news at the time. I can't remember. Maybe mid late 80s. And I remember sitting there thinking, raging, thinking, I'll have to go and work these kids and these gangs and that, for obvious reasons, right? Connection with my own life, and never thought about it. Went to Bible college, and every Friday at Bible college they would send like a different mission agency would come in, and these street mission people came in from Brazil, and I read a book by a woman called, I think it was Sarah or Susan
De
Cavallo, yeah. Stuff like that. And then because I'm a show off, I took missiology in my 3rd year specialist, and just married Miriam, my wife, and my cross-cultural placement I took in Brazil with the street gang. So we were being married 2 months. Miriam and I went to Brazil for 6 weeks and worked with the street gang project for my missiological placement. Then came back, got my degree, went to a middle-class church as a youth pastor, failed dismally there. That ended badly, which you can ask me about if you want. And then I went and did my master's, what was Brynterion College in Wales. It's now, I can't remember what it's called now. Mike Reeves is the.
Yeah, I studied with him. Yeah,
he's a good guy. Him. I like Mike. And then after that, then we went to Brazil, northern Brazil.
All right. Well, listen, I really want to get to 20 schemes just because we've only got 20 minutes left to chat. But just on Brazil, give us, you had 4 years there, you set up a school and it's still going strong, and an orphanage, was it?
Yeah, we planted a church, set up a project called Off the Streets, and like medical, dental, football school, set up a little preschool for kids from poor families, and then felt in the middle of this, what felt like a revival at the time. We felt like the Lord was calling us back to the UK.
Which was most unlikely in a sense because you're in the midst of great stuff.
Oh yeah, it was wild. It was actually a stripper. It was a stripper at a party that the Lord used to call us back to the UK.
Go on, tell that story.
I was chatting to my dad on the phone sporadically when I was in Brazil, and I think was due back for furlough. We went back 20 odd years, and it was my dad's 50th. My dad had us when we were young, and one of the members of the family ran me and said, "Look, it's your dad's 50th. I know you're back for a few months. Will you come to the party and will you pay for the stripper?" and I'm like, "Look, I think we've had this conversation before. I am a minister now. I am not paying for the stripper. All right?" They're like, "Yeah, but God created, bodies and boobs and that." I'm like, "Yeah, well, maybe he did, but it's not happening. I'll pay for the DJ. How about that?" So then talked to Miriam, and we were laughing about it. Talked to the elders of my church at the time. I said, "Look, I'm in this quandary now. Do I go? Do I not go? Because I know it's going to happen. Listen, there's going to be malls and stuff. There's going to be drugs. There's going to be all sorts of stuff there. That's just how these things go. Should I go? Should I not go?" Clearly, everyone's going, "Look, it's not. You shouldn't be going there. It's not good. It's not, blah blah blah." Speaking to Miriam, she's going, "Well, I'm not sure. There are going to be people I'd not seen since before I was converted for 20 years, maybe. I've not really seen my dad that much." So we prayed a lot about it, and I said, "Look, I'm going to go. You come with me, right, Miriam?" She said, "Yeah, I'll come with you." So, and I warned her what would happen. So we go, and it's quite amusing. Anyway, we go to this party. I go in there, all the stuff's happening, drinking. They're on the karaoke machine, and then they're all cracking jokes and trying to sing Christian songs with any Christian lyric at me. Like one was like a virgin. I'm like, I've got two kids, and they're still trying to anything. Was it one like a prayer or better the devil you know? I thought that was quite a clever one. So there was a lot of banter flying around the room, and then the stripper comes in. So I get up with Miriam, we leave, go to the bar. So there's two bar areas. Everyone's giving us grief and anyway. Stripper comes, does her business. She leaves. We come back in, and I said to her, "Look, I'll have a pint. We'll be away." So just show face. So get a pint, sit in the corner, and then I couldn't get out because slowly all night, one by one, these people who were just abusing us and giving us grief, all sitting down talking to me, broken lives, didn't see their kids, a mess, and talking to me about the Lord. They'd obviously seen that I'd changed, and not only changed but escaped the whole system. And so we're there till about 2 a.m. Honestly, at the end, people just sitting around smoking weed, a big massive group, and they're all just listening to me share the gospel. Anyway, and so we went, and I was buzzing. I'm thinking, I'm buzzing. That was good. I quite like that. Praise the Lord. We went, blah, blah, blah. And I remember saying to my dad, "Will you get yourself off to a church night?" He goes, "I haven't got the bottle to go to a church." I remember thinking, we hang around heavy people. Do you know what I mean? People you wouldn't want to be going anywhere near. You should be afraid of, and he's scared of going to a church building. That's how far the church is from our culture and our culture from the church, right? And I was thinking to myself, I've witnessed to all these geezers, a lot of working class lads, plasterers, builders. Of course, you've got the drug dealers, the unemployed, bin men, all these geezers wanting to know about the Lord. And I've told them about the Lord and where they're going. What church are you going to go? What church is even going to go anywhere near these geezers? And if they go into church, how are they going to be treated or accepted, right? And so that just plagued my mind. And that was the sort of precursor to us saying, look, I think we need to come back to the UK. I actually went to my mission board and said, look, the only missionary work they had in the UK at that point was with Muslims. And I said, look, here's where I'm at. I think we ought to come back as missionaries to the UK, stay with you guys, to counsel us. And they went, no, we don't do that. And I'm like, but I'm telling you, you ought to do that because it is a massive mission field and no one's doing it. And they just would not have it. They said, no, it's Brazil. So, well, I'm leaving then. And left in good terms, but I'm just like, one of the directors actually saw me 20 years later and said, I regret that. We regret that. So we came back to the UK, came to a church in Scotland, a community in Scotland I'd known from many, many years ago, Nidri, Edinburgh. It was a scheme, big scheme then. And took over a small church revitalisation that wasn't particularly effective. In 2007, stayed there 17 years. Only planned to stay 3. And
paint the picture, because it was absolute carnage, wasn't it, when you arrived?
Oh yeah, I mean it was wild. Yeah, I mean they hadn't seen converts for decades really. The building was getting smashed up. They were spending 10 grand a year just
fixing windows,
fixing everything. Members were getting beaten in the street, cars set on fire. I mean, when I first went, you had to have one guy to open the door, another guy to watch your back, firing house bricks at you, and guys would run into the service with bats and balaclavas. I think they were just at the wit's end of them. So I think I was the, scraping the bottom of the barrel. I was the last sort of shot, I think. So we went to the community and I went for an interview, which was quite hilarious. And gave me an insight into why they weren't getting anywhere. So I left the interview and said to Miriam, not a chance am I going there. Anyway, they had some church vote and 100% of people voted to call me. The guy around me, he was excited. I said, well, I'm gutted. I'll think about it. Hung up. Took some convincing from Miriam. So we thought, like, I'm going to leave a very successful ministry to go here. People were warning me not to do it. Almost everybody said, don't do it. Scotland's a graveyard. You're spiritually dead, blah, blah, blah. So that actually helped. So we went. So we decided, right, we'll go. We'll trust the Lord. We went. And the Lord was so good to us. So the first hour, this is no exaggeration, the first hour I am huckled. You must know this story, in the back of a police car. You can find it on the internet, on the national press it made. I'm driving in, moving to the church is about 500 yards away down the road from where we're moving this new house. We didn't realise we'd bought the house off a drug dealer who'd actually samurai sworded a guy to death. So it was sort of quite a known spot. But anyway, I'm driving from the church back up to the house. We move them in there, and the police car's behind me. I go into this cul-de-sac. All of a sudden, lights are on. Police are out the door, and I'm dragged out of the car. No preamble. I'm out. All the neighbours are out of the windows, right? I'm like, pretty calm. I'm like, whoa, what's the crack, lads? And this guy just shoves my face into the bonnet. Copper. He's an idiot. And shut up, you. So-and-so. This car's registered to Reverend Mez McConnell. I'm like, well, brains, I am the Reverend Mez McConnell. And his mate started laughing and said, right, listen, son, just give us your name. I said, look, that house there, I'm just moving in. Go in there, you find my wife, ask for my driving licence. So now they start looking a bit shady. And one of them went in, came back, looked at me, looked at the driving licence, and said to his mate, yeah, he is the Reverend McConnell. The guy lets me go, takes the cuffs off. And they don't know, they're quite clearly embarrassed. And like, what are you doing here and why do you look like this? So, shabby chic, I call this look. And I'm like, listen, boys, I'm here because these guys need Jesus. And you need Jesus too. They were gone so quick. They were like, they were away. Now, somehow the press got hold of it. And then some geezers come round, got me outside the church, text my photo. I'm like, what are you doing, mate? And he's like, well, this headline comes up about being a Ned. Nidri Ned, because Ned is a non-educated delinquent, so they call me the Ned pastor. So now, the next day, I'm walking around Nidri, everybody's hanging out their window going, hey, father, have you got any crack? Hey, how much coke? How much coke you got, fat? Because they all called me father for the first few years, because I didn't get into it. But it went so far around the estate, everyone knew who I was. Everyone knew there was a change of, like, I was the pastor of this church. At the time I was annoyed, but that proved providentially helpful for a number of reasons you can imagine, right? Now, church is getting smashed up, like I said. So anyway, there's a group of about 20, 30 lads there one night. And outside the building, calls an hassle. I wander up, giving it the usual. They're all balaclavaed up and all that. I said, listen, boys, what's the crack? Blah, blah, blah. They'll give me a load of cheek. And so a friend of mine knows some pretty dodgy people. So we just put it like that in the city. And I went to see one of them higher ups. Sat down and said, listen, I'm the pastor here. I'm having issues here. I'm not interested in your business. I'm not interested in any of that. I'm here to tell people about Jesus, but I need this to stop happening. And so he said, no worries. Made a phone call. He says, that's it. It's done. Went down church the next night, still a group of lads there. So I got the ringleader with a friend of mine. We took him round the side down an alleyway and said, listen, mate. He says, my friend so-and-so, you can give him a call now if you want. And he went pale, this kid. And I said, listen, my friends are tougher than all your friends. You're going to have to stop all of this. I'm the new guy now. Stop all of this or we're going to have a problem. Now, I don't want to have a problem, but we will have one. What I want you to do is trust Jesus, and we can all be pals, right? What do you want to do? So him and his well, sorry, mate. So stopped overnight. It all stopped. But I still seeing these kids in the street, so I would just invite them in. We had a cafe, community cafe. I must have given out 1,000 bacon butties. And then off the back of that, these kids would come in, then we would play football, and then we started our soccer team in the community. And lots of these lads, and now they're kids and whatever over the years, that's how we, in a very unorthodox way, stop the trouble, but actually gained, if you like, a foothold in the community. And actually, that ended up before we left. The church is now like a key central hanging spot in the community for so many people. We baptized so many people, and the church grew. And obviously, out of that small church grew the vision for 20 schemes.
So wonderful. Have you got, I mean, you've got loads of stories, but have you got a standout story of someone that you just thought, someone like you maybe, you just thought there's no way this person come to faith, and how they come through?
I mean, we've got a few. We've got women who've met them drugged up, dealing, selling themselves, kids in care, come to faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. They get their kids back, married, jobs.
Beautiful.
Serving the Lord. I mean, they're just seeing so many. But I'll say this, for every one of them, we'll see 20 who don't make it, just to be clear.
Yeah.
We live the parable of the sower, and it's brutal. People lived in my house 3-4 years, gone on with the Lord, done really well, been an intern, back on the streets, back doing crack. I think the last 4 out of 5 guests who've lived with us are dead. So just to put that side on it. But yeah, we see transformation. We've seen 2 young men come to faith in Niddrie through 15, 16 years of our football ministry. That's a long slog.
Amen.
But the football ministry that I was converted under all those years ago in Swindon, that went on for 20 odd years. I was the only guy they ever saw saved.
Is that right?
But I always say to those guys, because we meet every year to hang out, yeah, but 20 schemes is the fruit of that ministry. Just remember, just remember that. And so we've persevered in the football ministry and saw a little bit of fruit, but then we've seen, I mean, I remember we had about 12 people came to faith in a week, which I know it's not huge numbers, but in the UK where we were back then, that was wild. So we've seen it's gone up, and it goes up and down in seasons in church. Interesting phenomena. And it's not a political statement, but Charlie Kirk guy got killed.
All right.
Some American dude. I mean, I didn't know much about him. And the weeks following that dude's death, which had nothing to do with any of us, we've seen more growth in men in their 20s walking into our churches saying, tell us about Jesus. That's weird, right? But we're seeing it. Guys I've known years and years. Coming in and giving their lives to Christ. So, yeah, we've seen some mad ones.
Yeah. Well, listen, as we come into land, 20 schemes, fantastic vision, costly vision, long-term vision. Have you done all 20 now? Is it you're on 18? Where are you up to?
Yeah. So, I mean, 20 schemes is basically, I read an article in the press about the 50 most deprived labour wards in Scotland. Again, not a political statement. And I thought to myself, I wonder how many of those have got a good church. I paid a guy a year to research, came back with the research. You can imagine, negligible. And so the original vision for 20 schemes was 50 schemes, but I got talked off the ledge by lots of people, which we said, look, 20 schemes is probably more manageable, which is funny when you think about it. So the vision for 20 schemes is basically we want to plant or revitalise 20 gospel churches in 20 of Scotland's poorest communities. And people think I mean poor churches, I mean gospel churches that are a reflection of their communities, middle class, working class, non-working class. I thought we'll launch this. We launched it to universal apathy, of course. And I thought someone will say, oh, we're doing this, and this, but nothing came out of the woodwork. Just for context, there's 98 schemes in Glasgow alone.
Wow.
And our first church plant was in, I think, Ballanach in Glasgow. The vision was 20 churches in 10 years. on our 10th anniversary, we only had 8, so what a failure. But so it took us 10 years to plant 8, and then the last 2 years we planted 9. And so what's happened is we laid a strong foundation, and now our first gen churches are all planting or have sent out planters. So that's why the multiplication is happening. So we're at 17, probably at 20 by the end of the year, across the country. I myself left in a city and moved to the island of Orkney about 18 months ago, which is not a scheme, but has so many scheme-like characteristics, massive suicide rates, drug problems, child abuse, and took over a small church of about 8 members. And we've seen the Lord bless us. We're up to between 30 and 40 people on a Sunday, baptizing people, seeing people come to faith who've never been anywhere near a church. And so we're seeing that across the country. I mean, the Lord's blessed it. It's got to be the Lord, because look at the idiot leading it, right? So God's good to us, and we're just going to keep pushing forward.
Well, listen, folks, Mez has agreed to stay on to do a part 2, as in we'll put a link below for you to, if you want to hear more, like my church, St. Andrew's Community Church on Fox Hill, just south of Bath. We are a church on an estate that's 974 houses, and we want to do mission outreach really well. We've knocked on every door. We know those that are interested and those that are not interested. There's lots going on, but we want to see more fruit, we want to see more transformation. And so I want to learn more from Mez in terms of how we can do it better. I'm sure there are loads of listeners that want, in terms of ministry amongst the poor, incarnational stuff. So we're going to stay on for that after this for those that want to. But Mez, in terms of your parting shot to us listeners, challenge us, stir us, what would you want to say to us?
I mean, in terms of the ministry, listen, nearly half the population of the UK live in council estates, some sort of social housing, have never been to university nor are likely to. They come from working class traditional backgrounds. They empty your bins, they cut your hair, they clean your windows. Or where are they in our churches to be found? Something's wrong. And I think that the British middle class evangelical church needs to wake up to this gap and begin to seriously not just talk about it and wring their hands over it, but actually get out and do something about it, because I don't think the Lord's very happy with the current state of affairs.
Well, listen, folks, that is a challenge I think many of us need to hear, might not want to hear, and that's why I think this next part 2 is going to be really important. So please click the link to follow on from that. Thanks, Mez, so much for your time. God bless you, brother. Listen, guys, I'd love you to promote this podcast, get it out to your mates. I think loads of people could do with hearing it. I want to thank Adam Thomas Steer, Joel Parry for the editing, Mike Sanderman for the mixing. What I'd love you guys to do is to go to 20schemes.com to check out what the work is there, and it'd be fantastic if some people have been listening and your heart's been stirring and you want to get involved, but be it financially or thinking, I want to go and live in such a place and incarnate, be Christ in that community. So get in touch with Mez. You can do that through the website there. Next week, another fantastic guest from a very different life journey. They're so good, aren't they, all these different ones? But in the meantime, have a good week. God bless you, and toodaloo.